Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there, to the creatives, healers, sensitives, deep thinkers. This is an amazing episode with Esther Bergsma, who's done a tremendous amount of research on the highly sensitive person in the brain. And in this episode, she talks about some of the scientific research between highly sensitive people and non-highly sensitive people. In the highly sensitive person, the brain is processing in a lot more areas of the brain than the non-highly sensitive person. And in the highly sensitive person, the brain is always activated, tuning into social context. We talk about the role of anxiety and the highly sensitive person. She talks about something called optimal option ambition, which means that we want to connect to the best outcome and that we tend to come up with options that are more creative than non-highly sensitive people. She talks about some research and emotional granularity and introspection, which is the ability to feel what's going on inside of our bodies. We talk about emotional intelligence. We also talk about how Esther works with clients to help them figure out what's going on with them internally, what they're wanting and needing. We talk about the strengths of being a highly sensitive person. And she talks about a 4-step process that she uses when working with children to help them identify their feelings. This is just an amazing episode. And I met Esther about a year ago up at UC Santa Cruz. We were at a retreat where Dr. Elaine Aaron was there. And not only did she present, but then she spent a few hours with us just answering our questions. It was really an amazing experience. So let me tell you a little bit about Esther. Esther Bergsma, MA, is a frequent speaker on high sensitivity in the Netherlands. She is an author, trainer, scientific researcher, and expert on high sensitivity. She's written 2 books that are in Dutch. One is called Highly Sensitive Children, and the other is called The Highly Sensitive Brain. Esther wants to create awareness about the trait from a more scientific angle. She tackles skepticism with easy to understand but scientifically sound information, both verbally and written. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with other people. If you're on social media and you feel comfortable, I would love to spread the word. And this is an amazing episode I think you're really going to enjoy. And now, on to the show. Hey, Esther, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you. And why don't you tell everybody where you are coming from?
I'm living in the Netherlands, in Assen, in the north of the Netherlands.
Ah, that's amazing. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely a highly sensitive person.
And when did you learn you were a highly sensitive person?
Well, I was a manager and I had some physical complaints, back complaints for over a year, and it didn't stop. So I had to call in sick. It didn't progress, and in that period, nothing helped. And I read a book about the highly sensitive person by Elaine Aaron, and I thought, wow, that's me. So that was 11 years ago. And my burnout lasted for 4 years. But since I know I am a highly sensitive person, that really helped me get out of that really dark place, get my life turned around. I felt a lot better after that period, luckily.
What do you think of the term highly sensitive person?
Oh, interesting question, because I sometimes think it's the wrong term. Because there's so much misunderstanding about the term. People think it's about being sensitive to light or sensitive to emotion. Well, it is, but it's so much more than that. And I think because of these misunderstandings, that a lot of people don't get the help they need, children and grown-ups.
If there were another term that we used, what would you prefer it to be called?
Well, I haven't given that much thought, but I guess it would be something like deprocessors or something. A term that gives more attention to everything that goes on in the brain, and because that's really our unique trait or unique difference from other people.
I I've heard people say like very perceptive, like deeply perceptive. that we notice things. And I really like that because I think as soon as people hear sensitive, just this whole connotation comes up. That's not, it's really not based on the strengths that we have.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've done some research on the highly sensitive brain. I would love to hear some of your findings.
Well, what I did was I put together all the scientific research that was done on the highly sensitive brain compared to the non-highly sensitive person, but also I studied other projects about the brains to understand more what is really different for us HSPs. And what the findings are is that we are more perceptive, so we notice the subtle details in all our senses, but also in emotions of others, and in those little things out there. But the most important thing is that our brain is processing that with a lot more areas in the brain. So when a normal person is doing something or seeing something, he 2, 3, 4 brain areas, and the highly sensitive person, well, maybe 10 or 20. All those things are dragged into what he or she is doing. I sometimes compare it to a toolbox. A normal person has a hammer or saw, and whatever task is coming along, he takes the hammer and solves it until there's a problem that can't be solved with a hammer, and he takes something else. But the highly sensitive person is taking every tool into every task. So it takes more time and it takes more energy. But the way we look at things and the way we solve things is so much more thorough. And I think that's the strength that more HSPs can really feel from themselves, because it's something else what they hear from.
Esther, you cut out a little bit when you were talking, so I just want to repeat what I think I heard you say, that the highly sensitive brain is processing in a lot more areas of the brain. And what I thought I heard you say was maybe in the brain of a person who's not a highly sensitive person, like maybe 4 to 5 areas of the brain will show that they're processing more in a highly sensitive person. 10 to 20 areas of the brain will show activity when a highly sensitive person is processing. Did I get that information correct?
Yeah, well, it's not the exact number. We don't know that, but we do see a difference in activation when highly sensitives are doing tasks compared to non-highly sensitives. Much more. And what's really intriguing is that those areas that that's always activated are, for example, the areas in which we are tuning into the social context. So what is someone else thinking about me? How does he see me? Does he accept me? Or am I excluded from this social group? And that's always on with a highly sensitive person.
We're kind of jumping around, and it's just how my brain works. I hear a lot of highly sensitive people ask about the relationship between anxiety and being a highly sensitive person. And I know Dr. Aaron talks about those children that have difficult childhoods have a higher incident of anxiety and depression. But what's your understanding about the role of anxiety with highly sensitive people? And are you able to speak to, whether that comes from having a difficult childhood or not, or how that plays into it?
From different areas of research, we know that highly sensitive children who were raised in not so good circumstances develop more anxiety disorders, perform much less on schools or later on work. And we see those differences in the brain as well. So the highly sensitive brain is always more activated, always more connected with the different areas. But when a person has had a poor childhood, we see that there are different connections than when the person has a good childhood. And the highly sensitive person with a good childhood has somehow learned, and this is just embedded in the brain, to really manage their emotions better. So it does feel more intense. It's not less intense or something. It's still very intense, all the emotions, but a highly sensitive person with a good childhood knows how to regulate them, to feel the right amount of emotions, to do the right things. And then it's really a strength when you can do that. But when you as a highly sensitive person were raised in poor circumstances, you're very adaptive to your surroundings. And we suspect that that's why there are some changes. You're more aware of what's going on. So that might trigger that anxiousness that is associated with high sensitivity.
Okay, so I'm very linear and concrete. So if it feels like I'm trying to nail you down for an answer, it's because I am. So if I hear you correctly, that highly sensitive children that have that have difficult childhoods have higher rates of anxiety disorders. They don't perform as well in school. They're going to have more of that area of the brain that's more activated, that's tuned into social context, trying to see how they fit in, which relates to anxiety. Did I hear that correctly, or am I combining apples and oranges?
Almost, because the highly sensitive child was raised in perfect circumstances is still really trying to tune into the social context. So that's no different. But that child is much better in regulating everything that comes out of that tuning.
It does. So it sounds like, because I just always want to get things really clear. Highly sensitive person raised in a supportive environment, able to self-regulate, still has intense feelings, but knows how to manage them. Highly sensitive person with a difficult childhood is going to have a more difficult time regulating. But independent of that, the highly sensitive brain is going to be more tuned into social context, which still has that perception of how am I seen? Do I fit in? And so that's going to be a heightened awareness. So where is the overlay? Because to me, some of that can be labeled anxiety, that being focused on, am I okay? Do I fit in? That can be anxiety producing. And I don't want to label it as hard anxiety, but to me, that runs a little bit more on the anxious side. Can you respond to that?
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're trying to say. I think that's the difference between a talent and the symptoms that come out of it, because behavior that we find sometimes difficult to manage as a parent, for example, or a child, or the troubles we experience as an adult usually come from something that's our strength. And our strength as an HSP is that we are able to tune into the social context, to feel what's going on there and to feel if we fit in or not. But when you're not able to regulate this well enough, your anxiety heightens and your stress will enlarge as well. And when you have a lot of stress hormones, that makes you even more alert to social cues. And that means that you will feel very anxious about what everyone is doing around you. And that's the trouble, the hard feelings that you have about that. But when you're able to manage it, it won't feel as if it's something bad.
My mind's kind of going in a couple of different directions, so I'm just trying to, let me just go forward to this. I think that when we have what I call wounding, so that could be a difficult childhood, and we work with somebody or we do our own work to figure out what that wounding is, then we do learn ways to get more tools in the toolbox to manage and regulate our emotions. And I think that we still have strong emotional responses to things, but then we have more ways of learning how to manage it. So I totally agree with that. And I think that when we're put in a positive environment, we do so much better than non-HSPs, which is why 50% of clients in therapy are highly sensitive people, because we want to learn about ourselves and we want to do very well. So I really, if you're listening and these are things that you struggle with, there is so much more hope for the highly sensitive person than the non-highly sensitive person, because given the right circumstances, we just thrive. Maybe I just have to let the anxiety thing go, but I guess I'm wanting to provide more information about what is that distinction for HSPs, because I hear so many HSPs ask about this part of anxiety. And I know for me that I run more on the anxious side, and I don't really worry too much about what it is, but I'm definitely the one that's going to anticipate probably a poor outcome for things. Like I've given the example of the security screen door. I like to have it locked because I hear that people are walking into people's houses in my neighborhood. My son drove up to Long Beach last night. Like, text me when you get there, because I imagine that terrible things are going to happen. And that's what I need to know, that he's going to be safe. I own it, so it's not like I make my kids crazy over it. But I think that we do think about more potential outcomes. And I think we often think about things that are potentially more negative and scary because it's just how our brain works. I mean, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, but I see it as a quality as well, a strength, because our brain is unique. We are able to imagine all those outcomes, and most of it are the negative ones. What's going to happen to my son when he goes out? My son is 17, so that's a real issue for me in this moment. But we see a lot of possibilities, and we also see the positive outcomes. But the negative trigger more emotions, so we feel that more strongly. When we don't notice this as our strength, we think, we're anxious all the time. It's about labeling, I think, because in this society, when you are surrounded with people who are very brave, who just do things, never worry about anything, you might think you're you're odd, you're strange because you think of all those negative outcomes. But I think when you see it as a strength, because it is really helpful when you can see these things coming, so you can anticipate on it, so you can move in another direction to avoid it. It feels so different. It might help people to get a little of the feeling about this anxiety difference.
Well, yes. And I think that we're very skilled when it comes to troubleshooting and forecasting and projecting. And I often joke with clients that if only the function of anxiety was to imagine the best possible outcomes, what tends to happen for me and for the highly sensitive clients that I see is a new situation will come up and we tend to go to the worst place. What if it's a flop? What if I don't fit in? What if it's terrible? And so we kind of joke with this. Can you imagine if the function of your anxiety was to imagine the best possible outcome? I'm going to go, I'm going to feel satisfied and fulfilled. It's going to be an amazing experience. Just the practice of talking about that creates an awareness of where our mind sometimes automatically takes us, and then the ability that we have to imagine an entirely different outcome. I think that that's part of how we work on the healing, is just having that awareness. And even if we automatically go to that fearful place initially, we have choices about what we do once we have that initial fearful thought.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally agree. We can't change this. Our brain is wired to always come up with all those possible outcomes. So when you are trying to change that in yourself, well, you won't. The way you put it, you can put this talent into another use, to use it to forecast all positive outcomes. Well, then you really can take advantage of it.
Right. So let's talk about some more things about the brain that you researched or that you know about.
Well, in this processing, this is one of the main things that's going on. Elaine Aron called pause to check, the system that you need some time to put all those information together to make sense of it, and then you're able to act. But the processes that are going on in your brain I have called optimal option ambition, that you are trying to make the best option out of all this. So all those possible outcomes, you connect to the things you know about the people around you. What do they want? What are their interests? What would they prefer? Then you're trying to make that to the optimal option that would keep everybody happy. But of course, never is everybody happy with what you choose. And that's the paradox we're having to deal with, because that's what we want, but we can't get that. Through this mechanism, our brain is making loops all over again. So it's coming to a one point. So, okay, we might do this, but then it thinks of something else, and there we go again. So it's really exhausting to do this. On the other hand, at the end of this process, the options we do come up with are more creative. So creative thinking is one of the key elements of the highly sensitive brain. And I really want to stress that, because for children, but also in a workplace, colleagues, it's a trait that helps you get solutions to impossible problems. What we talked about, all those scary things that we come up with, there are the ground stones to come up with the creative solution. So it's an all-inclusive package.
My experience has been that highly sensitive people are very creative, and I wanted to make up a statement that said that they all are, and I got information that I couldn't do that. And then I think I totally backed off, and I don't think I've been talking about it enough. But even if you're not what you would traditionally consider creative in terms of art or producing things, I think that our ability to think and reason and problem solve is just fabulous. And when I've asked people about play, so many of the people that I interview love problem solving and puzzles and things that aren't traditionally considered play, extroverted, outward, active things are what we think of with play. But sometimes for the HSP, solving a problem or writing an article or things like that are just really exciting, because I think our brains are just so rich and deep.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the brain. What else did you find in your research?
It's one thing you said earlier, that highly sensitive people have very strong self-reflection. Is that a good word in English?
Yeah, that works.
Self-reflection, because they are constantly asking themselves, did I do the right thing? Can I do anything better the next time. And well, that can lead into ruminating, that can lead to fear of failure, but it can also lead to the desire to learn, to improve yourself. And that is one of the reasons is so helpful for HSPs, because they are really wanting to improve, and the therapist can help them create the circumstances in which they can improve. I think that's a very important finding.
I agree. I think so much of what we experience as highly sensitive people, because 80% of the population are not highly sensitive, we get so many negative messages about how we show up in the world. And once we learn about our trait and we find therapists or coaches that can help us, we really can reframe all of those things. Like, I don't use the word perseverate anymore. It's like I'm a deep thinker and a deep processor. And I think when we understand what the traits are and how to work with them and to not fight the fact that we do have strong emotional responses to things. We do think deeply about things, that those are strengths and gifts, and to change how we think about it and how we allow the people close to us to talk about it. That's when these become amazing superpowers.
One of the things that I write in my new book, The Highly Sensitive Brain, in Dutch it is at this moment, but is from the work of Lisa Feldman-Barrett. She is a neuropsychologist, and she studies the brain. She isn't into high sensitivity, but her work is really, really intriguing. And one of the things she said is that you have to have a high emotional granularity, by which she means that you are able to really use the right words to describe what is going on inside of you. Because when you have the right words, you send a message to your brain what is needed in your body. So what we talked about earlier, when you label your experiences as anxious, as, oh, there's something bad going on, I'm stressed, your stress hormones will go on. And when you have a lot of cortisol for a long period in your body, that does a lot of things, not good things. So when you're able to give the right description on what's going on, when you are emotional, have a high emotional granularity, your brain will get the right instructions. When you have that, the processes in your body will go better, and you have less sickness, illness. Less doctor's visits. And I think this is very important for highly sensitive people, because we feel so much, and because we are able to feel what's going on inside our body. It's called introspection. With this introspection, we feel what's going on in our intestines, in our heartbeat, in all those things. And when we label all those senses that we feel, all those signals, when we label them correctly, this will be a very, very important thing to master our strengths even more, because then we are able to connect our brain with our body, and we will be more balanced. It's a bit different, because emotional intelligence is about connecting with other people. It's about knowing what's going on in yourself. So that's an overlap. That's the same. But emotional intelligence is also about what's going on in the other. How can I communicate with the other? Well, those talents we already have as a highly sensitive person, but really feeling what's going on inside you, we have sometimes neglected, because we're all the time tuning into the other. And we're not focusing on what does our body say to us. What do we need? Do we need rest? Do we need to eat? Whatever. When we learn that as well, I think then the emotional intelligence will be very, very strong.
Yeah, I find with a lot of the clients that I work with, and I think it's one of those things that's adaptive and it's a strength, and it can get a little bit off balance because we are so tuned into what other people need. And many of us have a need for depth and connection. And because we've been told that we're too much, we're really good at focusing on what other people need, often to the expense of what we need. So finding that balance of how do we take care of ourselves? How do we set boundaries? How do we put our needs first? And trusting that we can still have deep and meaningful connections. But I think that because we tend to have so much empathy, and we can imagine what somebody else is going to feel if we set a limit with them, that it can work against us if we haven't done our work, because we need to put our own needs first. But because we can be so empathic and understanding what somebody else might feel, it precludes us taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, and empathy is could also be a break on really sharing what we need, because we can imagine what the other might respond to us, or what the consequences are for the other if he takes care of us. So then empathy is going against us. And empathy is a really important strength, especially in our profession. But I think the world needs empathy. We need to connect to one another. But as you say, we do, as HSPs, need to connect to ourselves as well. And this emotional granularity I spoke of is about really tuning into your own body. What does my body need to stay healthy? And when you're healthy and you have a healthy body and a healthy mind, you're even more able to help others and stay in good shape for yourself, not neglecting your own needs.
Well, and the other thing is that when we take care of ourselves, we model what self-care looks like. And especially if you have people that are close to you in your lives, we often worry about people getting angry or upset or leaving us or retaliating. But we model what self-care looks like. The other thing that I find a lot with my highly sensitive clients is when they have a hard time setting a boundary, that I'll ask them, well, if somebody set this boundary with you, how would that be for you? And they're like, no problem. So I think that's where, if we're skilled, we can almost use that, the skill of empathy, to imagine it in reverse, to give ourselves permission to set limits and to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, it's true. But still, then you need to feel what you do need, not what you think you need. Because I spoke to a lot of clients who, when I asked, well, what do you want? Well, and they gave answers what they thought I would want to hear, but not what they really wanted. Because they're sometimes so much driven away from their own core, from their own wishes, from their own needs, because they're always just wanting to do the right thing for the other.
So how do you help clients figure out what it is that they're really wanting and needing?
One of the techniques that I use are more, and not through words, but more visualizations or creative practices in which you're, for example, cutting out images of things that trigger you, that make you happy, and just first trouble finding the right words in English, and because I talk about this so much in Dutch, so all the Dutch words come up instead of the English.
I totally understand. Well, you're working with 2 languages, so I have all the kudos in the world for you. So take as much time as you need to find a word that works.
It's, I think the core is that you have to get rid of all the words and try to get something that's more creative, more imaginary, more images. And so one thing is just going through magazines and cutting out images that make you really happy, just because it feels good. And after you've done that, then analyzing it with me or your therapist. What is it that makes you happy about it? And then you have a take on it that's away from what you think someone else wants you to say. It's a loophole around all those walls you have probably built up to stay away from your most vulnerable side. And I think a lot of HSPs have built these walls because they have been hurt a lot of times in their youth and in their adult life as well, because their needs are sometimes different from what other people think and what other people need.
Right. And what I hear you saying is, if we talk about left brain, right brain, your thinking brain, your feeling brain. So your feeling brain is going to be your right brain. Your thinking brain is going to be your left brain. I think some of us end up living more on one side of our brain than our other, depending on what was okay in our childhoods. And so what I'm hearing you saying is, if someone's really stuck in their thinking brain, picking out images is going to pull from that emotion, the nonverbal part, so that you can start connecting with what, if we want to talk about Marie Kondo, what sparks joy, to really reconnect with that. And then you can kind of bring that back into your thinking brain to put words to it. But that's kind of the take that I'm getting from hearing what you're saying.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, you did a great job conveying it. So it totally makes sense. What else can you tell us? I just want information. This is great.
Oh, there's so much information. Well, about the brain, I think that it's really important for us to realize that our brain functions differently from everybody else. So that it's no use trying to be like everybody else. There's no use trying to keep up the same schedule as everybody else or to keep up the same self-support as everybody else, because we need other things. And for example, because of our really strongly activated brain, we're most of the times better at tasks. We're more accurate. But at the same time, the same task costs a lot of more stress and more energy. So when we ignore that, when we think, okay, but my friend has done the same task and she is going to this and that still, I have to do the same. Well, no, it doesn't work that way for us. We need to take our rests, we need to take our breaks, because otherwise we ask far too much from our bodies, and then we come into that that vicious circle about it's doubling, it's piling up, and then it's really difficult to turn it around.
So are you talking about like when we get overwhelmed or overstimulated or we get overtaxed, and then taking time to kind of come back to balance takes a lot more?
Yeah, and because we see others do other things, we think we can do the same as the others, and but we need more rest than everybody else, and that's not a vulnerability. That's not something that's bad about it. It's just that's what we need to fuel our brain, and our brain is our unique trait, so we have to keep it healthy.
Yep. I think that's also why it's so important for us to have at least one or two close people in our lives really understand and get us. Ideally, they would be highly sensitive people. I feel really blessed in the fact that I work from home. The people that are in my life really work for me. I worked in a hospital for 9 years, so I worked with lots of non-highly sensitive people. And it's so easy when you're in those environments. You can't not compare and can't not notice. We never know what is going on inside with someone. So someone who appears to be functioning very well, we don't know what happens when they go home and how they're having their relationships or managing their finances. But it's interesting. We have a social group that we hang out with every once in a while, my husband and I, and we recently got together. And I always leave these groups feeling like I'm just a total weirdo because I'm just not wired like they are. And it's just so interesting because it's not something I'm around very much. A part of my husband comes out that I don't normally see because, he talks about things that really excite him and kind of light him on fire that we don't talk about, just the two of us. It's such a clear reminder of like, I am so not like these people. And, I come home kind of questioning my reality because I think so many of us have had that experience of seeing and perceiving things that nobody else does. And so we're having this entirely different reality. It's a poor example, but I think about the story of the emperor has no clothes, that, there's one child who's going like, the guy doesn't have anything on, and everybody's going, oh, you look beautiful. And I think that can be the experience of many highly sensitive people. And so what happens is we often have to get louder and louder and louder to get people to listen to us because we're seeing things that are real that nobody else sees. And it really can create this sense of challenging reality.
I used a quote by Albert Einstein for my new book. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life feeling that it's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what's happening to us HSPs.
Yeah.
Because we are judged on things we're not good at. It's a really extroverted society.
Yes.
And we might be extroverted at HSPs, but even if we are, we can't really live up to the extroverted ideal that's promoted in this society. So we feel stupid all the time. We fail all the time. And we might try to be like everybody else, but we can't. We can't climb that tree. And we shouldn't want to climb the tree because we're at our best in the water. And in the water, we can really give our talents. And everyone can use those talents, because when we're in an animal kingdom,
right,
the talents of the fish are really helpful to build the kingdom. So I think that's a perspective that can help to normalize the negative experience you might have had as a listener, as an HSP. And on the other hand, what I see is that when we as a fish complain about this is not a healthy environment for us, we say, well, the water isn't clear, the water is toxic for us. Others might say, who are on the land, well, water looks fine to me, there's nothing wrong with the water. But to us, it's not okay. We can't function in these surroundings. For us, it's, for example, very important that we have a good atmosphere, that there's trust, that there's mutual understanding, and others might not really feel how important it is for us. And so that's the metaphor of the fish might help you understand why this miscommunication occurs.
Yeah, it's funny going back to this example because I want to use the word perseverating and I don't use that, but something very recently happened. And just this morning, my husband and I were processing about, again, we were with this group and some behavior was just not how I would ever act as an HSP. And I was talking to my husband about it. He's like, it wasn't that bad. It made me really uncomfortable. It was really that is just not how people behave in these situations. Like, well, it wasn't that bad, so I'm just validating what you're saying that, we say the water is toxic, it's not good. And somebody goes like, it's not that bad. Mm-hmm. Again, that sense of we really have an opportunity to own our reality and that in this setting, that healthy debate, and I'm putting the biggest air quotes I can on it, is about judgment and having a fight. That's different to me about we have some differences and let's get curious and talk about how we see things differently. But if you're going to poke at me and judge my beliefs and criticize them, that is not my idea of healthy debate. So I just want to validate what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it happens a lot.
It's like running with scissors.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to maybe spend another 5 minutes or so talking about this. And then I want to ask you the questions that I ask all my guests about being a highly sensitive person. Mm-hmm. What are some things that we haven't touched on that you feel like are important? And we've talked a lot about the strengths too, but if we can kind of tie a little bit more of that into, because I love when listeners can listen and really I want them to walk away going like, yeah, it rocks being an HSP.
Well, they should feel that way. Well, one of the strengths I guess we're not having mentioned today is that we're able to enjoy those little things. And well, I think that's a really important strength for us because it's really nice to enjoy things. And I, for myself, can really enjoy those little things, just a cuddle with my husband, for example, or a cup of tea. And I really go into this feeling and I really feel replenished after that. But I think it's important for a group or for a society as well when you have people who can do that, because when you can enjoy the little things, you change something in the atmosphere. You change something in about how people look at things. And well, you might feel, as I do, that our society is perhaps a bit much about materialism and a bit much about consumerism. And to really connect with another on a different level, well, you have to be able to enjoy those little things too. So that you could be a really good example for other people as an HSP, I guess.
One of the things I get asked often, so I'm always curious to ask other people, when HSPs ask, where can I find other highly sensitive people? What do you suggest?
Well, that's difficult because it's not always obvious that someone is highly sensitive. And of course, there are in the different countries groups of highly sensitive people that come together. So there might be local initiatives that you can join, for example, via Facebook or in canteens or I don't know what it's called, houses in the neighborhoods that are able to meet others. But sometimes a colleague of you can be a highly sensitive person and you won't even notice it, because my experience is that some people did have so much trouble in their childhood that they are trying to shut off, and that's their way to survive. So you really have to connect to one another to see that highly sensitive part of that person. So it might be an idea to open up to someone who you feel connected, but you perhaps don't know why, and to just speak out what's going on with you, how you feel, and then you might be surprised that there are more people who are like you and who think and feel like you.
Yeah. You know what I was just wondering when you were talking? It's like in my family, we didn't talk about feelings. So I learned to be very intellectual. So I've lived more of my life in my thinking brain than my feeling brain, and doing my work with therapy and learning about being a highly sensitive person. I feel like I've gotten more balance. But I'm thinking about a meetup group that that I've seen periodically for deep thinkers. And I've often used the term deep thinkers, deep feelers. So I'm almost wondering if you live in an area where there are meetup groups, if you look for things that look like they're more intellectual, deep thinkers, problem solvers, philosophical groups. I don't know. I'm just kind of popped in when you were talking, but I'm wondering if that's not.
Yeah. Good suggestion. Yeah.
I know in San Diego that we have meetup groups for highly sensitive people. And I usually tell people, what are the activities that you enjoy doing? Because chances are there are other HSPs that enjoy the things that you do, and unless they're like going to loud rock concerts or shooting guns. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, no judgment. They're just a little on the loud side for some of us. So
Yeah.
is there anything else that you want to talk about that I didn't ask you about before we go into some of the questions just about being a highly sensitive person?
Well, I would like to mention something about highly sensitive children. My first book was about that because I think it's so important that our highly sensitive persons are raised the right way. Just like you, I was raised without any talk about emotions. And that does something to you. It makes you feel that those emotions aren't real. They're not supposed to be there, that you're a bit odd for feeling them anyway. And I think if we can be able to give our children the ability to talk about their emotions, if we can give our children the feeling that they're understood, that there is someone who understands why they think that way, why they feel so intense, only that will make a very big difference. It doesn't have to be very complicated, but just understanding and the ability to talk about your emotions, that can give our highly sensitive children a really good kickstart.
So I would love for you to model. So if you have a child who's crying and is very upset about not being invited to a birthday party, can you share with the listeners exactly what you would say to that child, just to give a concrete example?
I've made a kind of model for parents to go into use in this kind of situations, and it starts with understanding, then acceptance, then guidelines, and then alternative 4 steps. And in this case, first you want to express your understanding of the situations. We as parents are often really wanting to help. We're really wanting to solve the problem. Say it's not that important, or oh, we will do this. And don't worry, you'll have a good time. You'll even have a better time than everyone else. But the child doesn't feel understood. And that's really important to do, because you might just signal that those emotions aren't really real. You shouldn't feel sad. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that the child knows that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly normal that he feels sad. It's not a great situation for him. And you understand why these emotions come up. When the child is a bit older, you also want the child to understand why he feels so intense, so that the way his brain works will promote these stronger emotions, so that the child won't criticize itself. The second step is acceptance. So sometimes as a parent, we don't want our child to be sad. We don't want our child to be angry, and we deny that that's a possibility. And in the step acceptance, you share. So you say, well, I understand you feel sad about this. It's not a good situation. And in acceptance, you say, it's totally okay to feel this sad. The third step is about setting boundaries. And this is a bit different case, because the boundaries are a bit different here. And when a child is really angry, you want to say, you can't kick another child, or you can't break things. And in this case, the boundaries are a bit different. But you can say something about how you're going to deal with this. Perhaps the child is so sad that it is hurting you, because it wants to out its emotions, and then you can set clear boundaries about that. The last step is something we as parents mostly ignore, and that's about how can you cope with this kind of situations in the future. It's about what can you do when you feel this way. So and I understand you're really sad, and well, it's really natural to feel this way. It's not nice when you're not invited. And then we come to the solution in alternative. What can we do? What can make you more happy? How can we make a good day after all with the two of us? It's important to do this with your child, and to do it out loud, because the child learns how to deal with these situations in the future. When it goes older, you want to make sure that the child has strategies when it feels overwhelmed or when it feels very emotional, to come out of this situation and to be able to create a better circumstance for itself.
I love that. Thank you very much. That was great. So, Esther, what do you do for play?
Oh, I like to dance, just go out with my husband.
Mm-hmm.
I like to read. That's really play for me. And I really like to go into those scientific articles and to really go into it and to really understand what it means. That's play for me. It's my work. But my husband always say, when you are behind your desk into all this material, scientific articles or research results, I see a smile on your face. Why? And I say, because I really love to go and I really understand what it means. I really want to grasp it. So that makes me really happy.
I admire that quality in you, that I love information and I love absorbing and giving information, but research and things that are just very technical and scientific, it just goes way over my head, which is probably why I have such a passion about breaking things down into really digestible pieces out of my own difficulty. So
really important trait. So
I admire your gift and your skill there. Is it easy for you to play?
I'm a bit harsh on myself sometimes, but I've learned a lot from my burnout. So yeah, I do have enough time to play and to enjoy the things I love about my life.
Can you remember something that someone said to you about being highly sensitive that felt hurtful or insensitive that you're comfortable sharing?
Well, I guess it was a remark from a friend of mine. She said that I was always thinking so complex. Why do I make everything so difficult? Why can't I just be more easy about things? And it really hurt me because well, I understand from her point of view it wasn't a very bad situation, but for me it was. And the way she said that was that it's my fault when when I wouldn't think about it that way, then the problem wouldn't be there. So I was to blame anyway,
Yeah.
and that
Well, it's
felt
like how
really
you show up in
hurtful.
the world is not okay, that you should be different as opposed to. Well, let me ask you this. What would you, if you could talk to her today, what would you want to tell her today?
Well, I would really wanted her to just put her arm around me and just to share her understanding that it could be difficult for me, this situation, even if it wasn't for her. That was the only thing I really wanted from her, I guess.
I guess what I'm thinking is that statement is really more about her than about you. That the unspoken message, and again, this is what I'm imagining. I could be wrong. It sounds like there's more to this, but if she had the awareness to go, wow, Esther, I don't think about things so deeply. And it really is kind of overwhelming to me because I don't think on such a deep level and I don't know what to do with it. It's really more about her than it was about you, that you're just doing what you do. And it was about her limitation. And I think so often as highly sensitive people, we get these kinds of comments. And instead of realizing that the other person doesn't have the depth or capacity or the need for meaning, instead of seeing that it's about their limitation, we take it on as there's something wrong with us. And it just makes me sad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nicely put. Thank you.
What are some of your superpowers being an HSP?
Well, creative thinking is really with some superpower I really enjoy about myself. But being empathetic as well, being able to enjoy these little things I really love about myself, because it gives me so much joy without any cost, because just the little things. And well, I guess being able to really read the context, to really understand what's going on in a group or what's going on in a field of, to really see the greater lines, to see the combinations, the links between things. Yeah, I guess that's what I really like about being highly sensitive.
What would you want to tell your younger self about being highly sensitive?
Well, I think I would tell myself that all the things she was feeling awkward about, that those are the things that are really the ones that make her great. And that she, instead of trying to suppress that, those are the things that she should be proud of.
My tagline is our perceived weaknesses are really our superpowers, which is what I hear you saying. Esther, where can people find you? Anything that you're working on that you want to tell us about?
Well, they can find me at www.hoogsensitief.nl. Highly sensitive, but it's in Dutch, is hoogsensitief.nl. And there are many blogs about many different aspects of high sensitivity. They're mostly in Dutch, some are in English, but with Google Translate you can read almost all of them. I have done research among highly sensitive people on the workplace. Over 5,500 people participated in over 20 countries, and those results are shared on my website. So if you're interested in that, you can find a lot of information about that there.
That sounds great. And I have the links to your website and your Facebook and your LinkedIn account, which will be in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com. Is there anything else that you didn't mention before we end our conversation today?
No, I think we covered a lot of aspects about highly sensitivity.
Esther, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on and chat. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Patricia.
All right. Have a great day.
Great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed it. The other area that Esther's done a lot of research on is highly sensitive people in the workplace. So shoot me an email and let me know what you think about this episode. And if you'd like to have Esther back again, I would love to have her talk about the workplace because she's done an amazing amount of research. In the fall of 2019, I'm going to be starting a new round of the online groups for highly sensitive people. And in these groups, we cover topics such as the negative messages that we get as highly sensitive people, perfectionism, demystifying emotions, self-care, boundaries, communication, vulnerability, authenticity, mindfulness, and creating a lifestyle that's HSP friendly. The groups that Jen and I are running right now have been amazing. We've got recorded modules that people listen to between sessions so that during the group, people really have a chance to talk about what they're learning, what they have questions about, what they're struggling with. There's interaction. They're really powerful and they're available worldwide. If you're interested in signing up for one of the groups that's going to be starting this fall, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a page for the HSP groups that gives you all kinds of information about them. So if you want some support, you want to do some skill building, they've really been very powerful. Thank you so much for being here today. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.